my own organizations for just over a decade. And I always had a business coach, always had mentors around me. And when I sold out of my businesses, I thought, okay, what could I do and what would suit my diverse brain? Because one of my entrepreneurial traits was that I would not settle for one business. I wanted a second business, and a third business, etc. And coaching just ticked that box because I have a different client, a different every day with a different goal, a different challenge, a different objective, etc. And when I had my own businesses, I was flitting between the different businesses whilst other people ran them for me, so that I could sort of stimulate my own entrepreneurial spirit, if that makes sense. And it was actually my own mentor or my own coach who said to me, "What are you going to do next?" I said, "I'm not quite sure." I said, "Probably look for another startup." And he said, "Well, why don't you just coach other people? Because obviously you've had some success." And that's how I got into the coaching game a little bit.
Awesome. For how long have you been coaching now?
14 years.
What do people consistently misunderstand about starting a business?
So I think the inconsistency is really around the fear of being an owner, a business owner that needs to know everything. An entrepreneurial trait that is quite common is perfectionism. And a lot of people don't start a business because they're waiting to be perfect at everything that they do, whether that's the technical aspect of their business in terms of I do what I do, or actually running a business. And very few entrepreneurs, business owners have ever been trained to run a business. And they just pick those things up as they go, if that makes sense. So, you have the good old saying, don't you? So how many hats do you wear when you are a startup entrepreneur? 1 minute you're the finance manager, and then
All of them.
exactly 100%. But how many of them have you ever been trained to do? And a coaching program that I run now, I run with now called Master Plan. We talk about the numbers and how poorly business owners have been trained about their numbers in the past, because ultimately the reason why so many business owners chase revenue is because of ultimately how they've been educated about their numbers in the past.
Well, go into more detail into this. I'm curious now. What is, in general, your go-to strategy when you start coaching someone?
My coaching strategy in general, or around the numbers.
Well, honestly, I want to have both. So let's start with the numbers and then the general one.
Okay, so the numbers is predominantly focusing on the right numbers. So when I had my own accountancy business, when I sold that to another accountancy business and then went to work for them as a commercial director, I one of the phrases we used was making the numbers work, but it was about making the right numbers work, and not encouraging people just to chase revenue for the sake of revenue, because chasing revenue has two associated costs to it that a lot of small businesses can't bear, which is one, a marketing cost to chase more and more people, to continually marketing and marketing and marketing and marketing. And secondly, the cost to deliver to a higher client base. So is there another way to achieve the objectives that you're looking to achieve? Whether that's a bottom line profit you want as a return on investment, which is where I always start with my clients, is okay, well, what does success look like for you? What is it? £1 million business in terms of revenue? Is it £100,000 worth of bottom line profit that gives you the lifestyle that you desire or want to remain accustomed to, or whatever that phrase may be? And ultimately, the number that I encourage my clients to focus on is their gross profit number, because anything below that gross profit number, I argue with them, is a fixed number, because below gross profit, you have fixed costs. Ultimately, they're fixed, whether just to keep the doors open, whether you make zero sales or lots of sales. And then the number below that is your bottom line profit. And that should be a not negotiable number that you're aiming for to have the lifestyle that you want as a business owner, for the return on investment, for the pain that you put yourself through on a day by day basis, to be an entrepreneur. And then, excuse me, once we know that gross profit number that we're aiming for, ultimately there's three numbers above that we focus on then to drive that gross profit number. Number of customers, don't really want to chase a big volume. That's hard work, costs a lot of money. Or is it average order value, or is it your gross margin? So ultimately, what can we do to create value that encourages you to be able to increase your average order value? Or what is it that you can do to streamline the business, either from a people perspective or from a raw material perspective, that maximizes your margins? And ultimately, I've started to work with clients that, they come in and they've got a 20% gross margin percentage. You go, well, as a service business, you've got to be at least double that. You've got to be hitting more of a 50%. As soon as we fix that, they realize they only need half the amount of customers. Which one would you rather chase?
Less customers, honestly. That's the same that similar conclusion that we came to. It's better to have a few rich customers that complain less than a massive amount of user base who are poor or just they just complain more.
Mm,
It's just that's what it is, and you can't service them all the proper way.
yep,
Also, if
100%.
you have healthier margins, you can obviously give better customer service. That's just
Yep. Short,
what
low margins constrain your business in so many different ways, not just from a cash perspective.
do you coach mostly local businesses? For example, may it be um, or is it gonna also be just completely online? Like, what would you say? What is your most focus on? Or is it completely everything mixed?
Yeah, everything mixed. I think predominantly my coaching for the first probably decade was in person. I enjoy coaching in person. I love seeing the reaction that people make to comments, to suggestions, to ideas. I see my role is as a coach to spark people's thoughts, to fuel their ideas, and often when you can only see this part of a face on Zoom or equivalent of, then you can't see them wriggle, you can't see them um, play with their hands in discomfort, whereas in person you can see that. But ultimately, that only enables me to deliver support to a certain number of people because of the capacity that I can do on that model. So I now coach a program which is an online support program. You have a more regular core, but shorter periods. It's a bit more sort of focused on specific steps as you go through a program, rather than my previous sort of generic coaching is more bespoke, more personalized to the problem and the issue that the business is facing at that moment in time. So yeah, there's a bit of a mix. I would say majority of my clients have been UK based businesses, but not just local to myself, but anywhere in the UK. But I have had a couple of overseas clients.
Why do smart, like from experience, why do smart people still fail to execute? Because in the end, execution is always bigger than having an idea. So why do you think that's bigger problem for smarter people?
I think it's I think predominantly there's a execution is boring. Yeah, execution is boring. Ideas is fun, and
True.
I probably don't relate that to smart people, if that makes sense, because the smart people get absorbed by the next shiny thing that comes through. AI has been a car crash for so many businesses chasing this AI, that AI, rather than trying to work out what their problem is and then trying to find the AI to be the solution. They've been jumping onto tools here, tools there, and seeing if that's the next golden bullet for their business. Um, so I think, like I say, execution is boring. Sorry, yeah, execution is boring in terms of I'd rather come up with the ideas, etc. And I actually don't think that many entrepreneurs are that disciplined to do the execution. Hence why, I always talk to my clients about making sure they get good players around them. They get A players around them. A players attract A players. So again, if you're running a good business with good people around you, then more people want to come and join that business, want to come and join that culture. Whereas if you settled because your budget doesn't allow you to employ an A player, you employ a C player, and their culture isn't brilliant in the organization, no surprise the next hire that you bring in is probably going to replicate that culture that's already in the business. So again, start strong.
How do you tell someone like, okay, not I'm just based on statistics, not every founder is an A player. How does this if it's a B player, how do they attract A players?
Um, well, I think the founders, I would hope that they're A players in their game, because ultimately that's what they're positioning to their audience. In terms of attracting A players to come and work in their team to deliver their mission, I think a lot of people try and hire people predominantly just on the package, on the benefits package, whether that's the salary, whether that's a car that goes with it, or whatever the other package will be. But they often don't share the the emotion of that journey that they're going to come and share with them, and get that buy into that direction. And some of my best clients, A players, are probably not paid what they should be paid because they're actually more engaged with delivering it. That the money's actually not as important to them now. It's more about wanting to be involved with that organization, be seen to be with that organization, to be part of that journey, rather than ultimately been paying well. Now the economic situation as we face at this moment in time is putting more pressure on the pay packet desire than ever before. But ultimately, I think if you hire people for the right reason, you build the right team, in my opinion.
What separates for you the A player from a B player or a C player potentially?
Well, a C player is they're either always a C player is either on the way out the door at the moment because I'm either going to be managing them out the door or they're going to be making the decision that this organisation's not right for them. A B player is predominantly the majority of people in the organisations, and we're ultimately trying to coach them up to take the place of our A players as part of our succession planning, or as the business scales, we need more A players in the right roles. I think the A player for me is the person that is taking the responsibility and the accountability that's placed upon them to help you take the business in the direction of travel that you want it to. And you can communicate that, but not all people want to contribute. Most other people I've come across want a 9 to 5 job and a pay packet that contributes to their weekend. Whereas if you can get people on the journey with you, it's probably like yourselves in terms of you guys putting your heads together and doing what you do. You've come together as a group and want a dual purpose. And again, how can we share that purpose? Now, an A player for me is somebody, like I say, has taken accountability and responsibility, and they they take autonomy for what they're delivered to achieve. So, for example, an A player salesperson is somebody you give, okay, I want you to make 50 phone calls in this week. So, okay, I break that down to 10 calls a day. In the first day, they get distracted or interrupted, so they don't make their 10 calls. So actually, what they end up doing is rather than making 50 calls in 4 days, they say, actually, I couldn't do those 10 calls. I'll just do 40 calls in the next 4 days because my average is 10 a day. Whereas the person with autonomy, responsibility, and accountability is there saying, okay, well, how do I now still make those 50 calls that I was tasked to do in the first place? Because probably that was my fault that I got hijacked or distracted on day one.
And unfortunately, I don't see that a lot around nowadays. I don't know. Even if I heard like some of even my friends, they start off like that, but something happens at work and then they drift off to B players, and things like really hard. Like for example, a friend, for example, he just got promoted, and he was last year he didn't get a raise, and he's still being paid less than his other people, and he got now a promotion, and he still didn't get a raise, 0%. He's like, man, he just doesn't feel valued at all, and he's like, okay, why am I doing all this stuff additionally if I'm not being valued? It's like you said earlier, it's like
Mm.
currently with the economic situation, this is tough to do. How do you ensure then as an as the company that you don't convert the A players into B players?
Have more conversations than you're probably having with people. Again, another thing that I see with many entrepreneurs is they avoid difficult conversations. Yeah, we want to have a business that runs quite nice and smoothly, and we don't like to have issues, whether that's with customers, members of staff, suppliers, whatever that may be. So we'll avoid those things and just hope they fix themselves. And there's a great I wish I could put the name to who I could accredit this matrix to, but it's called a skill will matrix. And I wish I had this when I started coaching 14 years ago. I came across it about 4 years ago, and it predominantly says that are they in the top quartile, high skill and high will. Now if you think about someone who starts to work for you, probably people you've just related to, when they've joined the organization, you hope that they're joining that organization with high will because they've applied for the job. Yeah, but they haven't quite got the high skill because you've hired them because they've got skill, but they haven't got the skill to do it your way. They don't follow your systems or your processes, your training this time. So with some initial investment from yourself, you move them up into that top quartile. So now they're committed, they're giving you high will, they're giving you high skill. If you carry on monitoring that situation with that employee, at some point they're going to move either down the skill line or down the will line. Now, a lot of people move down the wheel line because they get bored. The grass is greener the other side, or whatever that may be. But if you can identify that quicker, you can then have a conversation with that person. So actually, I've noticed over the last few months, your will has dropped. Can we just have a conversation about that? Now, how many entrepreneurs, business owners, do you know would be willing to have that conversation at first instance? How many more would predominantly just let it ride for a bit and see if it self-corrects itself? It doesn't self-correct itself because they keep slipping down the wheel line and then it goes too far. Now, if going back to your friend's point where he doesn't feel valued, if his employer had that conversation with him and said, you don't seem as motivated nowadays, is it, what's the reason? They then have an option as an employer to fix that or not fix it and allow that person to walk out the door. And if they're an A player, I'd probably argue that they're going to try and keep that person in the organization and therefore learn by their own mistakes of not valuing him or whatever that may be.
Makes sense,
And I
honestly.
just have the open the matrix. It is super super cool. I really like it. It's, by the way, the one who invented it is Max Landsberg.
Thank you. Thank you for crediting that. Yeah, I'll remember that for next time.
I mean, I was like, damn, but it makes so sense because I was always thinking like, how can we best like place the people? But it makes sense. Yes, if they're high in skill, but low in motivation, they're like capable, yes. But if they're low in skill but high motivation, they're aspiring because like, yeah, I want to do this. Tends to be like younger people who are like really like who just start a company, stuff like this. So they're like highly motivated but not capable yet. And then of course, if they go up to the top right, that's that's excelling, that's perfect. And of course, if they move to the left, it's doubtful, and then top left, yeah, it's capable. I really, really, I can resonate with this so much. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, a guy called Martin Norbury, wrote the book "I Don't Work Fridays," and he shares with me that you can't manage people. If you try to manage people, you're on a road to failure. But what you can do is you can give them a map, and that map is mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So the purpose is ultimately why are you employed? What are you trying to help me as the business owner achieve? The autonomy comes back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of them taking responsibility and accountability for delivery of their tasks. And then the mastery is ultimately the skill will matrix. How do I keep them up into that? Because ultimately, yes, they could slip back on the will line, but they could also slip down on the skill line because, again, with the best will in the world, there are employers out there that don't invest as much as they should do in their people to keep them at the skill level that they need to. So it's not that person's fault that they've slipped down on the skill line.
Do you think this will change now with AI? That the skill level, the line is going to be even. Someone who doesn't have the skill yet, with AI, they can get up there as long as the will is there.
Again, depends on the role within the business. I think AI will
Fair enough.
certainly change, revolutionize businesses in 2026. And any business that's not embracing it in a correct way, i.e., using it beyond ChatGPT to create a blog or a social media post, then is going to struggle. They're going to slip behind the curve ultimately. And I think there'll be some tasks that will help leverage people. I'm just watching my daughter studying at the moment, and she's got an AI agent that she's talking to as if it's her friend sat alongside her, and that the AI agent is marking her work. He's critiquing her work. She's arguing back with him, and I'm going, "You're arguing with the AI guy." And yeah, that sort of stuff. But again, it's just a different way. And I think it'll be a generational thing as well in terms of how easily AI is adopted into businesses from that side of it. But I think there'll be certain roles whereby you're still going to need the humane creativity to bring AI, what I'd class bland AI content to life.
You you mentioned that founders tend to avoid hard conversations, maybe with employees or as well as clients. That comes me to my question: How do you know you have the wrong clients? Like, what are signs? And you're like, because like sometimes people are doing things just to, but it's a client, he pays. But what are signs that you're like, okay, it's actually not worth having this client. You should focus on somebody else.
Yeah. So one of them we've already talked about, which is the numbers. Does that client contribute to your numbers in terms of your target margin, your target average order value? Do they ultimately value you enough to pay you what you're worth? I think there's very much the gut feel. I think the entrepreneurial gut feel, the emotion that's attached to that is quite often correct. It just needs a little bit of factual information behind it to support it. And the example I would say there is when you get up in the morning and you're going to work with such and such, do you jump out of bed and go, I can't wait to go and meet that person? Or do you actually want to stay in bed and not go and meet that person? And I've actually fired clients, that I've worked with before because I've had that situation whereby I'm not going to enjoy today. And I've gone to that meeting for the second time, not not expecting to enjoy it, not enjoyed it, and at the end of the meeting said, I think it's time we parted ways, basically. So I think that's a pretty good factor in terms of whether they're the right customer. Like I say, the numbers contribute to that, in terms of where they contribute to, because if you're trying to aim for a particular margin, a particular average order value, and they're only willing to pay half of that, then they're making your business more difficult to run ultimately. So therefore, why wouldn't you let go of that resource and try and find somebody else who is prepared to pay that? And I used to always say that I used to run a membership organization for bookkeepers, and it never surprised me that the bookkeeper, when they started up, took on the wrong client first off, because they were desperate for a client. They're desperate for a client, desperate to prove that the business would work. They'd take any client, and ultimately the client that was looking for a new bookkeeper was probably a problem client because they'd been left that other client in the first place. So that person then wouldn't pay them what they were worth, but because they were desperate for work, they took it underneath the rate that they wanted to charge. And because that person was in such a mess, they absorbed all their time for an agreed fee that should have only been 5 hours a week, but ended up being 40 hours a week. So therefore, they didn't have the rest of the week to market their business, work on the business, do the admin in their business, live, or whatever that may be. So again, I think it's that those two things for me is, do the numbers stack up and does the emotion stack up?
Uh, I have a question about, since you worked a lot with bookkeepers and there's so many stereotypes about it, how was it? First of all, I mean, you had a startup in it, and then second of all, you had the membership about it. And when you said that a membership with bookkeepers, I'm like, whether like, yo, do you have a discount from me? What's do I have to pay for this? How was it overall? How's the industry? Because like we get stereotypes, and sometimes stereotypes are a little bit true.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's one thing. I run a networking organization. I've run working organizations for 15 years. And one of the things I say to most businesses is, don't walk into the room and tell them immediately what it is that you do, because whatever business you run, somebody's probably got an opinion about what it is that you do. Yeah, whether that's bookkeepers,
100%.
whether that's business coaches, whether that's podcast hosts or whatever that may be. Yeah. So, like for example, when I had my bookkeeping business, all my team were banned from saying they were bookkeepers if they went to a networking event. Their phrase was, "We help other businesses." And ultimately that broke
Nice.
that first 3 to 7 seconds of when a first impression is created. And then obviously the question was, well, how do you do that? And then we can get into the detail of whether it was bookkeeping or whatever phrasing we were using at that time. I think stereotyping of bookkeeping is, I used to always joke with the bookkeepers at this point, is that if you walk into a room and say you're a bookkeeper, people are going to imagine you're the person that's sat in the corner tapping away at your keyboard, probably not talking to anybody until it's the time for you to just get up and leave. You're pretty anal about numbers. You're chased down to 1p rather than writing off a pound, for example, and that'll probably frustrate some of the people that you're trying to work with as entrepreneurs. So why would you go into a room and tell people you're an entrepreneur? Tell people you're a bookkeeper. Again, because of those personal traits. And I would say probably 80% of the membership that I used to look after would tick that box as that profile. Hence why we did quite a bit of work to try and change that profile for the members that we had.
So that obviously then, because it's super hard, I know in Germany, like a bookkeeper, like finding one that is not taking it. What for us was hard. Like we found someone like here in Spain, yeah, like he's German, and it was really, really hard, and we were super happy with it. But when I ask around, like all our friends who have businesses, I'm like, they always, not always, but 90% of the time, they're like, yo, I'm not really happy with my bookkeeper because of the things that you just mentioned, because they have never learned to do this interaction, unfortunately. I wish they had more coaching like that. That'd be amazing. Just like, hey, we help you. This is our focus. And they explain it better, not just like, yo, what's happening here with the pennies? And like, yo,
This is same.
I'm an entrepreneur.
The same as any business, though, isn't it? So many businesses focus
Yeah.
on their technical aspect of the business, and not the pain, the problem, the fear, the want, the need that they're trying to create for their customer. And ultimately, why do I want a bookkeeper? I want a bookkeeper to give me accurate records so I keep the tax authorities off my back, and also that I've got good financial information that I can make good decisions in my business. So why don't we tell business owners that that's what we do, rather than we tell them we're a bookkeeper and straight away they go, I don't want one of them because my impression of a bookkeeper is X, Y, Z.
I'm going to
I've
clip this and I'm going to send this to our bookkeeper. This is a marketing ad.
So if because I'm thinking right now of founders in general, and what do you think are the beliefs that limit founders early on?
Um, so perfectionism, I think, limits,
Hmm.
as we talked about earlier. I think when you're striving for perfectionism, then you sometimes don't get anything out there. Like, I'm waiting for the perfect website, I'm waiting for the perfect marketing message, I'm waiting for the perfect product design to get out there. I always say it's about making sure that your market intelligence aligns with your product development. So ultimately, you get something out there, you learn from that, it creates a feedback loop for you. So I think perfectionism is one. I know it's challenged quite often in terms of the language that's used around it, but imposter syndrome is another one. That monkey sat on the shoulder telling you that you're not good enough, or there's other people out there, even though they are good, that are better than you, or creating a moment of doubt in your moment of time, so that you sit outside in the car before going into a networking event, you're all pumped up, you go through the door, as you're just about to push through that door, that monkey taps you on the shoulder, says, "Are you sure you want to go through that door?" And again, you don't go through that door probably as effectively and efficiently as possible. And I think the other thing is again the attempt by many founders, entrepreneurs, to try and wear every single hat for for perhaps too long into their business. I've just been having a conversation with one of my own clients who is on the journey to hire. He's got an apprentice, but he's just looking to hire his first employee, and he's gone, I can't deal with it. It's a block I can't get over. And what we've worked backwards, and we've reverse engineered what it looks like to get to his trigger points. So his trigger points was, he'd need a certain amount of money in the business, he'd need certain confidence in his marketing channels to give him constant lead generation, so that when he does hire that person, he's got some risk cover in terms of cash in the bank, but he's also got work for this person when that person's hired, rather than it just be feeling like a whim. When we've had that conversation with him, he's gone, okay, now I feel I know what the journey is. I know that ultimately what I need to do to get to a point where I'm then comfortable to hire somebody. So I can get the advert out there now. It's probably going to take me a couple of months to hire somebody, but in the interim, get the marketing machine working. The conversion rate's at 75, nearly 80%. So he's converting the leads that are
Wow.
coming through. So ultimately, get more leads in, get the work in, get your order book up, get the cash in the bank, get your trigger points ticked, and therefore that fear of hiring somebody will be removed. And ultimately, when he hires somebody, he can then educate himself on what else he needs to do in his business, rather than just being the technician in his business. One of my favorite books, what we see it on the bookshelf behind, is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, that talks about becoming from the technician in your business to being the manager of the business, to being the entrepreneur, the founder, the owner of your business. And too many people get stuck in the comfort zone, which is their technician's piece. I'm really comfortable doing X because that's what I do. That's what I'm good at. But I'm not good at doing the bookkeeping or the marketing or whatever that may be. Yeah. But they still won't hire people to do the things that they're not good at.
So, how much of the business success is actually psychology versus strategy? Because we talked about both right now.
Good question.
Or is it a mix?
Well, I'm going to go for the safe bet and say it's a mix, but I think the psychology and the comfort factor around your psychology comes with good strategy. Yeah. And I think the good strategy always comes back to good numbers and the understanding of numbers. And we know one of the weaknesses of many entrepreneurs is the understanding of the real numbers in their business. Yeah. So, for example, an example I always use is that my strategy as a business coach would be driven by my numbers. So let's say, for example, I want to earn £20,000 per month. I could do that with one client paying me £20,000. Or I could do it with 20,000 clients buying an online product from me for £1. Two ends of the spectrum, two very different business models, two very different strategies, two very different client approaches or marketing approaches. So ultimately, once I decide, and it might be somewhere in between, obviously, then I can say, okay, well, my strategy then can shape around that. So if I know it's a 20,000 product for one customer, that's got to be a premium product, and it's going to be a specific customer that's willing to pay £20,000 a month because of the ROI that they're going to be expecting. Yeah. If it's somewhere in the middle, so let's say, for example, it's £1,000 a month that someone was going to have to pay me. There's more customers to that. I've got to get 20 customers of those now. But that's probably more likely a sweet spot that I'd probably be able to achieve much easier than a £20,000 customer. But again, what does that need to look like? Because that's still a different product to a £1 product. So the numbers shape the strategy. The strategy then, in terms of execution, then gives me the confidence. And the confidence helps my mindset, because that's all to do with something I write in the book about, which is basically the behavioral cycle, which is ultimately what we do and what we execute. The results we get impacts our future behavior because of the cycle. Because if we get good results, it gives us confidence and motivation to execute again. If we get poor results, then there's a danger that we could spiral the other way and impact our motivation that way.
Is it all when I also saw that you are an author and you wrote the Financial Times Guide to Starting a Business? All of what you just mentioned is all in there?
Yeah, so very specifically, we so very purposely positioned. The reason I wanted to write the book, coming back to what I was saying earlier, is that I used to do in-person coaching. I still got some in-person coaching of those sessions are 2 hours. I now do online coaching, which is half an hour. So that means that I can, with my capacity, I can support more people. That still, in my opinion, wasn't going to be enough reach. So I wanted to write a book. I'd wrote my first book, which is the 105 Ways to Accelerate Your Business Success, and that was self-published. And that led, I believe, to the content that I share online, the videos I share, the content I share. It led me to being asked to be commissioned to write the book for the Financial Times Guide to Starting a Business, and that was exciting for me because it gave me that opportunity to write some content that was slightly different to what was out there in a startup book. Very, very often you'll get a startup book that talks about the hats that we talked about earlier, the hats you have to wear. So this is how you do your marketing, and this is how you do your numbers, and this is how you do your sales, etc. And yes, the book has to cover that. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had, I think, credibility. But I think how I've tried to write the book, I've tried to write it in a way that is relatable. It's written in a way that you can digest in small chunks. You could probably pick it up and just read the section that's relevant to you, or it leads very much with the entrepreneurial mindset, which a lot of startup books sort of brush over. They're not being an important part. And I don't believe that you're born with an entrepreneurial mindset. I believe that you can learn an entrepreneurial mindset. You can gain an entrepreneurial mindset. So hence why I wanted to start the book that way. And again, coming back to your point earlier, is it strategy, or is it is it motivation, or success driven that way?
Writing a book is something that is so complex. How did you even start with this? Because there's so many things, or there's so many ways to skin the cat. So, what was your, how did you do it?
Um, so I was lucky enough that you can tell how old I am, and not just by this grey hair, but I used to have a DVD.
Look at us.
Yeah.
I prefer gray any day.
But you can tell how grey mine is, because I used to have a DVD for startups. So I had some content structure already that had proven to work in the past on a DVD format. I was lucky enough that for the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've shared regular content, whether that's through blog, videos, etc. So I had a lot of content out there, and it was just basically working out what the framework would be. When I was approached by Pearson's, the publishers, on behalf of the Financial Times Guide, I then brought together a focus group. And in that focus group, we had conversations about what would be important to them if they were starting again, what would be the book that they would pick up if they were starting that business. And hopefully what I've been able to do is to shape a guide rather than a book, in terms of what that guide looks like to take people on a journey from, first of all, dealing with that mindset. What do I need to have in terms, not only a mindset, but am I ready to start a business? Because ultimately there'll be a lot of people that are either undercapitalized or not in a position to be able to run that business. We see it now in terms of, I think the entrepreneur is getting younger because they have less responsibilities, should we say? Whereas when you get to a certain age and you may have a family and you've got a decent salary that you perhaps can't give up, taking that entrepreneurial leap is a little bit more difficult to do. So I think the entrepreneurial mindset is important. And then we take people through the content of the book, which is, again, going through in terms of thinking, are you ready? What's the initial considerations in terms of the financials look like in your business, and how do you model your strategy and your plan around that? And then looking at the executions. So the executions being in terms of your sales, your marketing, and then your growth strategies after you've gone through the initial startup and scale stages.
So it's less theoretical, more action focused.
I'd like to think what I've done is shared my experience, like I said earlier, to fuel or spark ideas and thoughts for people, as I would as a coach. So I've tried to write it as if I was coaching people. Yeah, you're correct.
So you're a business coach. But the question is for me, as a business coach, there's so many things that you can transfer from the business side to the personal life. What are like the biggest transfers for you that you were like, yeah, I can do this in my personal life?
I think personally, I think it all starts in the personal life in terms of what do you want to do in the personal life, what do you want to achieve in your personal life, and then allow the business to be that vehicle for that, whether that's financially or whether that's a skill set or a lifestyle or whatever it is that you want for that personal aspect. I think the linkage is so obvious, but so many people don't make it. So, for example, if I'm driven by assets, ultimately I need cash to buy those assets. And if I don't have a business because that's my sole income that drives the cash, then I'm not going to achieve those personal goals. So quite a bit of work I do early on with my own private coaching is that is linking the personal goals to the private goals, and it is quite interesting in terms of you know I do break down the vanity number when someone says to me they want to be £1 million business. I go, why do you want to be £1 million business? Well, that's what other people have told me success looks like. Okay, but what does success look like? What does success look like for you? What do you need to make £1 million in revenue to make your numbers to give you what's defined as success by yourself? And ultimately, that's a phrase you'll hear me refer to quite often: is what does success look like for you, not by anybody else, what anybody else. And I've tried to avoid what that says in my book in terms of I will never define what success looks like to anybody. It has to be self-defined by themselves and work backwards, reverse engineered, as I say.
What's the most common answer they give you?
It starts with money. It starts with money. It's driven by money. Whether, like I say, whether it's the vanity number of £1 million revenue, because that's supposedly success for some people, and ultimately, if it is, I don't decredit that at all. But I think it's mispositioned, if that makes sense. I think then it's there will come to a financial number that's the lifestyle in terms of why they chose to be self-employed versus employed, because many people could get a job for paying more than what they're probably doing. And then it's balancing the other factors. Why are you doing it? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? What are the other lifestyle requirements that you want? Like how many entrepreneurs do we see that don't go to their child's plays or sports days or things like that because I'm an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur I've got to do these things. And okay, no, if that's what you want, i.e. you want time, then what does that reverse engineer, what does that look like?
So for you, is entrepreneurship freedom or is it just a different type of pressure?
For me personally, for me personally, it's about freedom. Yeah, ultimately about freedom of choice, control of my own destiny. For what I see in most of my clients, I would say entrepreneurship is an opportunity for them to create the lifestyle that they want, and again in their control. But some of them back away from that control. So ultimately, our own destiny as an entrepreneur is in our hands, and that may need some investment. That may need some different way of thinking. That may need some different support. That might needs some different people around me. But ultimately, the good old saying, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. I always tag on the end of it. And unless you're lucky. And if you're like me, who's never won the lottery, I'm not that lucky.
Oh,
So again, ultimately,
same. Biggest I ever made was 20 euros, so it's not much.
there you go.
It's like, or
Yeah.
if you do what everyone else does, you're gonna get the same results that everyone else does.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yep.
it's
Like in
just like you're just
general,
gonna
like
be
if you
average.
do average, like that's the thing. Everybody, like if you do what every average person does, you only get that result. It's the same. Like I think even Albert Einstein has a definition. If you do twice the same thing and expect different results, that's a definition of insanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same with like entrepreneurship. If you always just do the same, and it's like it will not all of a sudden just like okay, it works now.
Yeah. I think going back to strategy you were
But
saying about earlier is trying to help people find their uncontended path. Because when I talk to a lot of people, I think, okay, what's different about your business? What's your differentiation? What's your unique selling point? I would say 8 out of 10 people tell me that they can offer a better service than their competitors. Okay.
Obviously.
What does that mean? What does service mean? And I quite often, as a coach, go into child mode. And what's the most common question asked by a child? Why? Yeah.
How?
Why?
Why?
And just go, okay, so you say that your differentiation is your service. Why? Why is it? Or you say your differentiation is your skill. Why is it different? And then once you start answering those type of questions, you get down to the devil of the detail in terms of what the true definition is. You don't. I use a phrase, and I upset a lot of my clients in terms of actually your value proposition is too vanilla. It's too bland. Doesn't stand out from the crowd. It's too similar. And again, we get into the detail to find out what specifically is different about them. That might be a level of expertise and experience. It might be a skill. It might be their knowledge. But again, we'll find some way in terms of differentiating them to their competitors to make them stand out from the crowd. Not
Do you have
just.
do you have a framework for that? Do you be like, hey, this is too vanilla. How do we make this hazelnut?
I wouldn't say there's a specific framework. I think it's ultimately not accepting not accepting a bland vanilla response. Basically, that that the most simple framework that I use with clients is that if they give me a piece of messaging or their value proposition, I in effect find out the competitor that irritates them more than anything, and I cross their name out and I put that competitor's name across the top and I say, can your competitor claim exactly what you've just written? And most of the time they go, yeah. I go, well, it's not unique enough, is it? You know, ultimately, if I'm a buyer of your product or your services, I've got a choice between you and them now. If you're not differentiating you know, what's going to make me lean in towards you with interest?
Do you think
What's
that plays a big role? Because nowadays it is, especially for software that you offer online, it is really, really hard to offer something that is not cannot be copied or done the same way. So this differentiator that you mentioned earlier is becoming smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So what we always say is that distribution is king. Because at the end of the day, if you have the best distribution on the long term, you're gonna win.
Yep.
So how do you say to these businesses now that the differentiator is going to be smaller or like it can't be technical?
Well, I think with something like that, a SaaS product, you've got to get to market quickly. If you don't get to market quickly, then you've lost a big opportunity to create market opportunity for you. I think then it's one of the reasons why I've personally started to lean away from the good old USP, the unique selling point, because ultimately there's a lot of things that aren't unique in business nowadays, and a lot of business owners again get stuck looking for that unique thing rather than ultimately what's slightly different about what you do compared to your competitors that makes you stand out from the crowd and gets eyes on you rather than eyes on your competitors. So I think it is, again, coming back to what I was just saying, it's about, is it down to expertise, experience, knowledge, skill that, again, is creating a differentiation? I was having a conversation with someone probably last week time, and they were saying that, they didn't want to do their competitor analysis because they know about their competitors already. So what's the point? And I said, okay, when was the last time you did your competitor analysis? And what do you think is your differentiation? And they told me they're differentiating. I went, okay, well, there's 3 names who are your direct competitors. Go and have a look at their website, and they all say they're doing exactly the same. Yeah. So ultimately, you don't have a differentiator that you thought you have. And at that moment, after a little bit of a sulk, then they accepted that they had to find a different way of positioning themselves. And ultimately, their positioning piece was that they'd been around longer. So ultimately, it just needed a really simple link in their value proposition about, they'd been around 30 years where their competitors had only been around a couple of years. So ultimately, if you're buying a very similar product or service, and there's someone who's done it for 30 years successfully and still in business, and there's somebody who's just joined the market, as a consumer, I think most people would lean towards the experience.
Trust. Yeah.
in general, also like I'm a big fan of Alex Amosian.
Mm-hmm.
Read all his books, and he's always like big on guarantees as well as like Grand Slam offer. So I think that's like also like very cool ways to differentiate yourself, especially with the guarantee, because in the end the consumer comes for the result because he's paying a result. He's not paying like a service. Like for example, because we also right now our product that we're building is in the AI space for beauty. And we're basically helping clients or beauty professionals get more clients. So we're not saying we're creating for you and talking avatar, etc. like this. We're just saying, hey, we help you get more clients and fill up your agenda. So it's more about actually outcome based. And then because a lot of people are doubtful, so like we put a guarantee, right? Because if you put a guarantee, it's like, hey, like if you don't get these clients, you don't have to pay the second month, etc. So that way you can just like differentiate yourself as well from, like, for example, agencies who will just like have you stay 3 or 4 months, you don't have any guarantees, etc.
Yep, 100%. And again, I love the Hormozy, the 4 core principle of Hormozy, taking people from a cold audience into a warm audience into a hot audience. And again, too many business owners don't follow that model in terms of. I always say we've all got limited resources for our marketing in terms of time and money, unless we're McDonald's or Amazon that can splash the cash in bus stops or wherever else we see it. Yeah. So if we've got limited resources in terms of time and money, why do we spend so much money on brand awareness? And what I love about Hormozy is it's lead generative marketing. Yeah, in terms of how do you get people over the line to commit to either sign up to your mailing list to get them from your cold audience into your warm audience, so you can then nurture them, etc. I think in terms of the guarantee, it's really interesting because I think it's one way, and you've highlighted it in your own words in terms of what that differentiation could looks like. But so many businesses are fearful of giving a guarantee because, people might claim it. Oh no, wow, crikey, is that what happens? But ultimately, then when I turn to one of my clients, I go, okay, so if they didn't like the product, would you refund them? Yeah, because it wouldn't be worth it not upsetting a customer. Okay. If you did a poor service, would you redo it again at no extra cost to that customer? Oh, of course I would, because reputation. I said, well, why wouldn't you guarantee it then? And then the penny drops that they're ultimately guaranteeing it anyway, but not putting it out there as a guarantee. So ultimately, again,
It's crazy how the mind works, right? It's
uh,
like it's the same thing, but we associate it differently. Of like, man, I'm afraid I'm losing something. But on the other hand, you're like, yeah, I'm also afraid of losing my reputation. But you're not making the connection. Like, oh, I'm losing the money here already. Plus that, you're like, okay, what am I going to do?
mhm,
It is really, really crazy.
Also, if it just increases your conversion rate just by a
Yeah,
few couple
obviously.
percentage, it just makes a huge difference. If the top funnel is big enough, it's, but yeah.
the biggest problem for most businesses is the lead funnel. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're currently building that up as well. It's just like one of the things you got to find anything, how to get them. If you do cold calls, if you do ads, Meta, uh, Google, whatever you have, and then get it going. Get it also directly to the ICP, because even with our current focus with our business, we notice there is, even though you think you're already specific enough, sometimes you're not. You get on these calls then, and then you realize, okay, I didn't filter out early enough and even more in depth. I need to be like, look, you're already making money, you want to make more. And in our case, for example, you're willing to spend money, not all of a sudden, oh my God, this costs a couple $100. No, no, no. You gotta filter them out early.
Even exactly. I mean, I just had the call earlier, and just like, even though what you do the value framework is like, how much does one new client bring you? It's like, oh, it's a couple thousand is lifetime value. It's like, okay. So if if you get one client who gives you a couple thousand in a month extra, how much is $400 still a lot? And then still, even though when you do the value framework, he was still like, but I can do it myself. I was like, yes, you can build everything yourself nowadays with AI, but how
But are
much is
you?
your time worth it? And but then you just, even after playing through all these scenarios, I just had to realize, I was like as you mentioned earlier with the gut feeling, I was like, yeah, no, I don't think this. Even if you would be buying, I don't think it would be worth it, because like the headache, that's like a 4 hour help or 5 hour work week should automatically change it into 40 hours just for that one client. It's not worth it. So these are things, especially when you're starting, because our new project is relatively new. You are like desperate to make it work. And that's when you have to realize, no, it's not worth the headache. There are other customers. Luckily, I had another call before where it was the opposite. He was just like, yeah, it's working very well for him right now already, but he wants to also expand and make more. So it's like it completely opposite, back by back the calls, and then you can see, okay, our ICP is not defined enough yet, so we have to filter out first the ones who are afraid to spend to make more money, because yeah,
100%.
they don't do the math, and we can't teach them the mindset. We can't just filter, and then you don't want to waste time. It's like, look, and obviously all these people are like, the phrasing, starting from the ad to the landing page, the funnel page, everything is just for specific for that ICP. Is like, yeah, that's me. I'm making 500K a year. I want to make 1 million.
Mm.
How am I going to do this?
And again,
Yeah,
there's an
it's
example of
fascinating.
coming back to the numbers. People not understanding the numbers, so therefore they see the marketing spend as a cost rather than investment. And you know, again, I referred to a gentleman earlier, a guy called Martin Norbury, and another thing, I was talking to him probably about a year ago. Again, he said, I don't understand why people say that they want £2,000 a month for their marketing, so therefore their marketing budget is £24,000. No, yeah, go on then, tell me more. He said, well, ultimately their marketing budget is £2,000. I said, tell me more. He said, well, if you spend £2,000, they should get £2,000 and a little bit back at the end of the month. And therefore, they should reinvest that £2,000 and therefore never need more than £2,000, not £24,000. So, okay, interesting way of looking at
That's
it.
so smart.
Yeah. And again,
I never thought about this. Yeah.
something I shared on my socials at the weekend is that I used a toll road, and the toll road cost me just under £12, and it saved me 40 minutes. And for me, it was a no-brainer because I didn't want to sit in the car for another 40 minutes. I related that to businesses about how many people wouldn't spend £12 to give them back 40 minutes to work on their business. They'd just carry on driving up the motorway and not spending that
Yeah.
£12.
Like, especially
Relation.
with knowledge. If you, because I'm relating it back to Alex Mosey, but he also mentioned in his books that he paid some marketing agency when he started, or marketing guy, like a couple $1,000 just to teach him how to run ads. So like step by step. So he learned it. So he acquired the skill. Because in the end, it is that £12, 40-minute save. Because he could learn it himself, maybe, but it takes him so much time. And it's all about speed and momentum, especially when you start something, because you have to put on so many hats. And if you're experimenting without having a guide or somebody who showed you, who has done it for thousands of times, it's so much harder. So it's worth spending that money. It's a steal then.
That's Hormoz's background, wasn't it? In terms of ultimately trying to sell gym memberships, and actually found that he had more value selling the system to sell gym memberships that people wanted to buy than trying to fill his own gym. There we go.
Serendipity, sometimes how that works out.
Yeah.
It's like, it's crazy. Just keep persistency. What do you think also? What's the biggest or the most important attribute an entrepreneur should have?
Resilience.
Grit. I like it. Have you read the book or listened to the book of Angela Duckworth, Grit?
No, I've not, but I will add that to my list. Yeah.
It's really, really good. She just talks about how grit is well, she did a study. She's a PhD, and it's just exactly like you said, grit/resilience is the most important thing, most important indicator for success, because intelligence doesn't matter if you don't are gritty. Once your intelligence just solves the problem to a certain degree, and then you hit a wall, and then what are you gonna do? If you're not resilient, you're gonna give up.
And I actually think that I don't know about in your country, but in the UK, the failure rates for startups is quite high. It's probably 1 in 3 in the first year, 1 in 9 in the first 5, and that actually succeed. And I don't think that's necessarily because sometimes the businesses fail because of running out of cash. I think it's sometimes that people give up because it's hard work. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's where I come back to the resilience bit. It's hard work because it's hard work to get clients. It's hard work to keep clients happy by doing the delivery. It's hard work dealing with all the noise that's going around because you're following social media and everybody looks so much better than you and all that sort of stuff. And that's hard work. So some people without good resilience will give up on it. My favorite book when we're talking about books on that is Let Them by Mal Robbins, which basically just says,
Oh, I love Mel Robbins.
let
It's
them be
the
them.
ultimate, the last book, right? Because there was like the high five. No, the 5 second rule. Then the second one was the high five or something like this. I also like that as well from her. So like you're giving yourself every morning in the mirror a self high five, because if you should be the first one who was like cheering you up, and then you had the let them theory. I also like them because I'm actually almost finishing that book and on Audible. I love it. I always listen to it. So great. Because the thing is, like, yes, you always just seeing somebody else on vacation on Instagram. But yeah, man, let them. Maybe you were not invited to that vacation with your friends because maybe it was some random event. So I like that concept as well. It's for me very interesting how it's broken down just by let them. You already have a rule. Like she's like very good at just breaking it down in a concept in 2 or 3 words.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it comes down to, in terms of, it's very, if you compare entrepreneurship to employment, yeah, employment is ultimately for most people a straight line of promotion. Yeah, so you start here, you get a little bit of a pay rise, you get promoted, and there's that straight line from A to B. We know the entrepreneurial journey is not a straight line from A to B. There's going to be some ups and there's going to be some downs, and we can enjoy the ups, but ultimately as entrepreneurs, we don't really enjoy the ups because we're entrepreneurs and we're actually, well, I deserve the up, so I'm just striving for the next thing. We don't celebrate those successes as well as we should do as entrepreneurs. But actually, we feel the downs. We feel the downs pretty hard, and therefore, if we're not resilient to that in terms of being able to bounce back, to be able to manage that in terms of our mindset, to be able to identify the risks before they occur, which is part of that entrepreneurial mindset that I refer to, then I think it enables us to trip ourselves up, and when we trip ourselves up, ultimately we could bail out. It's like trying to achieve any goal. Trying to achieve a successful business is like trying to achieve any goal. If I've got a weight loss goal, from the 1st of January, I've got a weight loss goal. As soon as I get tripped up on that goal, what do? I bail out. I probably blame somebody else. Yeah. Likewise, again, my goal is a business. If it gets more difficult and I'm tripped up, I might bail out and just go and get a job because it's easier, and give up on those dreams that I had.
Yeah, that's I hear that so many times with our friends as well. Like they want to stop smoking, then they trip up once and like, you know what? I'm going on a trip next week in a month, and there's going to be friends. We're going to smoke there anyway, so why
That's
stop
why
smoking?
that's why I like the concept of stretch goals. So you have not just one goal to aim for, but like the lowest and the highest. So you have like a stretch goal, and the other thing is if you fail once, that's fine. If you fail twice in a row, it's a start of a new habit. So I don't think it's
Tiny habits,
it's not an
yes.
issue at all if you fail once in a while. But like the next day, if you decide, okay, I fucked up yesterday. Today I'm gonna make it right. So I think that's the most important part to keep you consistent because nobody's perfect. You cannot have the perfect score. It's not gonna happen. It's human, and that also helps to relieve the pressure of somebody to actually achieve their goals. Because like that's why also when you have, oh, I need to lose 20 pounds, just rather say, I'm happy if I'm losing 10 pounds. 20 would be ideal, but everything in the range is fine. So I think that's like makes it easier and releases the pressure a lot.
Yeah, and I believe that achieving goals is achieving a series of smaller goals. So you have that big, hairy, audacious goal, which is the thing that you've set out to achieve, and then you've got a number of smaller steps that may trip you up, but they don't rock you to the bottom. Like if I'm trying to go back to the weight loss, if I set myself a weight loss goal of 3 stone, and I don't achieve that 3 stone very easily, I'm going to trip myself up and fall to the bottom and bail out. Or actually, if I say I'm going to do a pound by a pound by a pound, and I can see that gradual movement, I'm working my way towards that. And again, I do quite a bit of goal setting work with my clients, and it's ultimately, traditional goal setting is what goal do you want to achieve, when do you want to achieve it by, and let's get running towards that goal. And how do we get there? And as soon as we hit the brick wall, we bang and we bail out. Yeah. Whereas actually, if we break that down and say, okay, well, what's likely to stop you from achieving that goal? And actually, let's break that down into smaller goals and objectives, and then say, okay, well, let's build those solutions to those obstacles into your action plan. And if you activate, execute, as we talked earlier, about those things that are in those smaller goals, you're less likely to trip yourself up towards your larger goal. So it's a little bit like
I like that a lot. That reminds me of I'm not sure whether it was in Tiny Habits or Atomic Habits. One of the two. Basically, the author was saying that he hated flossing his teeth. And he's like, yeah, man, I really hate it, but it's like he got so many cavities. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna start. So he literally started just like doing one tooth and then he stopped. Okay. And then the next day is like, after a while, it's like, okay, I got used to one, then he did two. So it's like these baby steps, and he was celebrating it all the way. He's like, okay, no, I'm happy. Like he said, you have to make it so tiny that it's ridiculous. That's the same like these steps, right? You have to break it down that achieving it makes it so easy that you kind of have to laugh about yourself. But at the same time, because you're laughing about yourself and you're achieving it, you're just like supporting it. It's not like this gigantic goal, but no, it's like the tiny step. You're laughing because like, man, I already achieved this. So you're like pushing forward, which makes the wheel like spin faster and faster. And then the end, like the author even went in the end to a factory that is producing floss, dental floss, because he got so into it. So it's just like reminded me of that story. Talking about big goals and
James Clear.
starting new.
James Clear is a brilliant writer. Brilliant writer, and he writes the book Atomic Habits is written in a way that, you know, if you can't create good habits off the back of reading that, then it's nothing to do with the author. I can guarantee you. It's there's some brilliant stuff in that. There's some brilliant stuff in that book.
It is really good. Mike, do you have some advice for someone who wants to start a business and currently has a job? Make it as short as possible, briefly.
So I think it's predominantly be fair with yourself and say, what does that look like? You know, can I take a part-time role? Can I take a job? You know, reduce my hours at work, whilst I can basically side hustle to start with. See, there's the opportunity. And one of the things I often talk about is trigger points. What's the trigger that would make you say, okay, I'm willing to just give this job up and just go and do this thing?
Awesome. I love it. Mike, thank you so much for all your information, and I love the conversation. It was great having you on the pod.
Where can people find you, Mike?
Okay, well, I hang out on LinkedIn quite a bit. So it's Mike Foster Oxford is the LinkedIn handle. On various other social media. Website is entrepreneursmentor.co.uk. But ultimately, if you're looking at starting a business, grab the Financial Times Guide to Starting a Business.
I love it.